Hello, YouTube. We are back. Thank you for joining us. This is Nursing Dynamics, and we have a special guest today, Dr. McIntosh. She comes from us from New York with a wealth of experience. So, Dr. McIntosh, give us a little background on yourself. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. I really appreciate the invite. I really loved a lot of your content, and I'm thank you for creating this space. So I am a nurse practitioner. I've been in healthcare. I've been a nurse for over 20 years. I'm a duly certified nurse practitioner, family medicine, and also psychiatric medicine. But predominantly, I work in inpatient neurology, seeing patients who are predominantly strokes, seizures, MS, anything emergent.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So when it comes to your nursing journey specifically, like what led you to say, you know what, I want to be a nurse, and then above that to get to the doctorate level. Take us through that
Okay.
journey.
Okay, awesome. So, I come from a background of hairdressers, so there were no nurses in my family, and I became a home health aide. And a little bit during that time, I also decided to open up a group daycare because I had got pregnant and was going to have my son. And I also went back. I did the home health aide for a little while, but then I became a nurse's assistant. I was doing the nursing assistant work and then opened up my daycare. And then while I was working within the nursing home, I would just notice some of the care and treatment that the patients were receiving. And I said, you know what? I think I could do that. I think I could become a nurse. The reason why my ultimate passion initially was law school. I've always wanted to be a lawyer. It's still on my list of things to do, but I didn't know what kind of law I wanted to pursue at the time. So I decided once I learned that I did not need a political science degree to go into law, that I could do nursing, get a 4-year degree, and then go back. So that's what kind of pushed me down the path. I really like nursing because I felt like I could advocate for my patients and their families. So that's what actually put me on the path for nursing. I initially went to a 2-year school. I got my associates. I worked a little while, decided to go back for my bachelor's. After I obtained my bachelor's, I decided that I wanted to combine that passion of law, and I obtained a legal nurse consultant certificate. But at the same time, I was like, okay, I really want to learn more, do more, see more. So in 2008, I decided to go for the family nurse practitioner, graduated in 2011, got my first job in, the early 2012, worked as a nurse practitioner for about 2 years. I went to see a patient. We were called down to see this patient for stroke-like symptoms. And when I got there, everything he was describing was depression. So I started thinking that we didn't even screen for depression in our population. So that now I said, okay, I could do something about this. So I went to the literature, start thinking about, okay, and just start reviewing about depression and stroke, and found out that 1/3 of the population after stroke have depression. And but all the things, it can lead to increased mortality, it can lead to poor functional outcomes. So that's what was the driving force for me to go back for my DNP. And so I started my DNP in 2014. That was around the same time that I found out about human trafficking as well. So I started doing a lot of community activism around that. Graduated with my DNP in 2015. I didn't get a different position, after finishing school. I stayed in my same position, but I started branching out and doing a lot more community activism. Specifically, that's kind of how I was using my doctorate, building programs for healthcare providers, educating them about human trafficking. And that's essentially what I did. So in 2018, I said, okay, well, I've had this passion for psychiatric medicine. I, I remember when I did my daycare that I would see a lot of the kids have behavioral issues, have all these things going on with them, some of them that had been previously molested. And I would wonder, how would they grow up to be functional adults? So, and then I would also see a few patients come in to neurology that we would get called to. And it was essentially kind of trauma, psychiatric illnesses kind of presenting physically. So I said, okay, I really need to know more about this. And that was another driving force for me to go back and get my psych NP. And then pretty much I did that, worked as a psych NP for about a year, but just got so busy with my activism work and my inpatient neurology work that I spent more time doing that. And that's kind of how I ended up on those different paths.
Very impressive, Dr. McIntosh. I didn't know you were dual certified, so that's great to know. And I agree, psych and neuro definitely cross paths quite a bit. I don't have a huge psych background, but I noticed that early on in my nursing career that those two definitely go hand in hand. But I'm glad that you were able to pick up on that, and then you saw a need and decided to fill it. And are you mostly working within the BIPOC community?
No, not really. Well, I would kind of say, it's a urban hospital. So predominantly, I mean, I see a mixed bag of different patients. It's not predominantly, but I'm the only BIPOC nurse on the team. I would say that. But no, not specifically.
Okay. Also, can you tell us more about the work that you do with human trafficking? Specifically, do you do any of the SAFE exams? Do you do anything on the legal aspect of it? What exactly do you do with that?
Right. So I did miss one thing. So before I actually found out about human trafficking, I also was a SANE nurse. So I would for a year, I would go in, work with a team where I would go in and collect the evidence, and then hand that over to this, the security, and have the follow the proper chain of command. And I was an expert witness once. But when I found out about human trafficking, the organization that I found out about it with, decided that it would be best for me to do education around it because I didn't even know anything about it. And at that time, I had went to 3 different schools of nursing. So if I didn't know anything about it, a lot of my other nursing colleagues didn't either. So for me, it's mostly been education, and it's been education not only to nurses, but physicians, social workers. It's also included police officers. We've done some of that. Faith-based organizations. We've talked to a couple different high school. We've talked to social workers. We've even talked to our elected officials. Every year we would, for the last 6 years, we had an annual proclamation. We would invite the elected officials. We would talk to them about the issue of human trafficking, that it exists in our community, and give them some of the recommendations on some of the bills that we were following that would impact our patient population or our individuals that have been trafficked. And not just for human trafficking, but if there was mental health issues, which oftentimes there's a huge mental health need, there's a huge housing need. And then one of the biggest predictors of human trafficking is child abuse. So any bills around child abuse that would align with our mission, we would also advocate for those as well. So doing that work in the community in 2017, there's a New York public health law that basically came out and said that organizations have to develop protocols, policies around human trafficking. So then I was placed on a task force and charged with, as a part of the team, coming up with a protocol, which I wrote. And then that protocol got embedded and is now a policy within our hospital system, which is affiliated with 6 other systems. So now that we have we use that protocol to I try to identify, looking at least 10, kind of observational things for human trafficking, but the tool is there, that and then the process is there in terms of what happens next, connecting with social workers, and then even having some resources on the back end to give the individuals that may be trafficked. And now all that information even filters on the discharge instructions across the system to anyone. So they have that information if they need it.
Very impressive. That's excellent. And then I can imagine that work has to be very fulfilling because you can see a direct impact on what you do. Oftentimes as nurses, depending on where you work, but sometimes we don't really get to see the fruits of our labor executed, so to say, so especially in that way, it has such a major impact up to the level of legislation. That's excellent.
All right, so we talked about some good attributes in terms, or not attributes, but talk about some good things in terms of what you love. Okay, so let's transition just a little bit into what kind of experiences have you had as a BIPOC nurse when it comes to a toxic work environment? What, we see that a lot on your platform in terms of toxicity in the workforce or in the workplace, and we've all experienced it. We all have. So I would like to just hear more about what your experiences are, because I feel like, where I come from, I live in Tennessee, and I'm not sure, you said she's from New York up north, which is way up north, right? Well, we have racism down here, and it's known. It's known, okay? The literally the Klan is down the street, or the home of the founder of the Klan is down the street from where I live, about an hour and a half away. So we're used to it here in the South. We shouldn't be. I shouldn't even said that, but that's the reality. We're used to it. It's different, and we don't see a lot of BIPOC nurses. Like, unless you work in, I always tell people in Nashville, there's not a lot of us. There's a lot of Black people, but not in nursing, unless you're in the county hospital. But then even then, the white nurses have taken that hospital over too. So we don't see a whole lot of us. So when I get on TikTok and hear other nurses telling their stories, I'm like, oh, I go through that too. And then other people say, I go through that too. And so it's not refreshing, because it's the whole notion of misery loves company. But the thing is, it feels good to know that I'm not alone, in the sense that I'm dealing with toxicity in the workplace. Again, it's not a good thing. But sometimes when you work in an environment such as I do, where I'm the only, as you mentioned, the only BIPOC nurse, or one of few, it's hard. It's very hard. So I'd like to hear more of your thoughts, feelings, experiences.
Yeah, so I would say that in my bedside nursing career, when I first became a nurse, I experienced that a lot with, definitely would notice it more with favoritism, would notice it more with this more senior nurses giving you heavier assignments, um, telling you the wrong information, or giving you, telling you the wrong information or giving you no information. I remember one time specifically, I was hooking up a Plurivac to my patient, well, hooking up the system and trying to turn it on and trying to figure out which direction the dial will go in. And the nurse that I did ask, she was telling me completely the wrong thing. And when I asked another nurse, she gave me the right information, but, I just really thought, like, you would really go to that extreme to hurt the patient just in an effort to be racist or to be bullying, or, it just didn't seem right to me. So those would be some of the things that I would notice. Or for example, when I was like literally off my first day of orientation, it was like I was held to this way different standard as if I'd been a senior nurse, where it was like day one. And I remember, orders coming in late. And like I said, I was brand new. I was trying to manage my patients by myself, but the level of complaint that and write up and that I received from that incident, it just was overwhelming, to say, okay, there was no support there for me. Day one off orientation. I would say more recently in my NP, in the last 16 months, probably, yeah, about 16 months, I have never had this level of bullying from a provider. And definitely the favoritism. When you're trying to present the patient to them, anything you're saying is dismissed. I would go through things like the provider would text me, and mind you, my shift starts at 8 o'clock. He would tell the new white PA that I wouldn't see the follow-ups. But meanwhile, in the morning, he's texting me at 7:21 or 6:21, way out before my shift starts, and telling me not to see them. So he's painting this picture as if I'm not doing my work, or that I'm being insubordinate to him if I see the follow-ups and he's already sent me a text to tell me not to do it. So that was a lot of the level of bullying that I have experienced. And you would know it would be the microaggressions, or you would feel it, but it's like you can't put a finger on it. You can't really explain it to anybody else because you're the only one. Or they see the favoritism, but they can't really deem it as discrimination. So, yes, it may be harassment. Yes, it may be bullying, but they can't say, okay, well, it's just specifically you that it's happening to. But when everybody else would notice it, they would say, what is it with him and you? Why does he target you like that? But when you complain about it to leadership in HR, they don't see it. So those were some more specific incidents.
Wow, I'm sorry to hear that. And this bully that you're mentioning, was this a physician?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Brand new physician. The behavior was, I mean, he would do things to other people around the hospital with certain ways. It wasn't as extreme as it would to me, but he's still there. He's still there, despite many complaints from many people. But the level of treatment that I received compared to everyone else, me was based in racism.
I'm sorry you had to go through that. I've had a few physician bullies as well, and it sucks. And just out of curiosity, was this physician also a surgeon?
No,
Not a surgeon. Okay.
no.
Okay. And a lot of times, and I've had other nurse practitioners with similar stories where they've been mistreated by physicians, and it often falls on deaf ears, primarily because they are the biggest workhorses. So, I mean, a physician has to, I don't even know if I can say the word on YouTube, but they have to almost like physically assault somebody or like unalive multiple patients, gross negligence before you ever gonna get rid of a physician. And that's another reason why I feel like that's also underreported, because it does fall on deaf ears. Because what are they going to do? They're the ones bringing the patients in, and they get the 100% reimbursement. So, there's that. So yeah, I mean, it would have to be so far left, because they will definitely get rid of the NP and the PA and anybody else before they get rid of the positions. And I've worked with some great ones, but it's like the ones that aren't great really aren't great. And when I say great, I'm not even talking about patient care. I'm talking about just being able to work alongside someone, because that also goes into having a toxic work environment is teamwork. It takes a team, so it's hard to perform well in your job when you have these other things that's not even necessarily patient care related that are eating away at you, and 100% preventable at that. So yeah, I'm sorry you had to experience that. That's crazy. It was something else I was going to ask you. Oh, one other question. In New York, is it official that nurse practitioners are independent now there?
Yeah, I mean, definitely we have to have the 3,600 hours first. But what I'm noticing is that a lot of organizations are now putting, the disclaimer that, you have the 3,600 hours, and yes, they're essentially independent. So yes, but you have to have that 3,600 hours first.
Okay. And then you can do that in about a year-ish, depending on how often you work. So that's not, I mean, fresh out of school, I think you probably do need some guidance, especially with some of these programs out here. But that's a story for another day. Okay. So let me ask you this. So based on what you just said in terms of the bullying due to racism and other experiences that you've had dealing with racism in the healthcare industry, how do you cope with it?
Right. So this is actually why I developed my Succeed at Work program, because what I realize is that I can't change anyone. I can't change that physician. I can't change the system. They, if they're not willing to hold them accountable, then I can't do anything about that. So within that, I said, okay, well, how can I maintain my credibility? Because if I pull Shanae out and respond negatively to the behavior that's happening to me, then I'm the one that's going to be at fault. Then I'm the one that's going to be targeted and labeled and said, oh, see how she responds in those situations. So how I started monitoring the behavior. When I responded definitely in a professional way, it there was not the ability to say that I was being kind of combative. He could not spin the conversation on me. So when I realized if I controlled my emotions, if I regulated myself, if I answer questions kind of matter of factly, then I would see him spiral. But yet I wasn't taking ownership of the negative behavior. I was now able to not only come to work, but also come to work and be focused on what I had to do instead of dealing with the drama. So that's one of the things for me. I started really focusing on what I could control. I can control my tone. I can control my facial expressions. I can control my response, and I can control my response to him, being more emotionally intelligent, being more self-aware, and leading myself. So those were some of the ways. In addition to documenting, we know if it's not documented, it's not done. Really creating that paper trail. Texts he was sending me, I would save those. You have to save them, but you also, in any emails he was sending, send them to your own personal email. People forget that. But create a paper trail, send all those emails, text to your email. Finally, I was talking to multiple leaders. When that didn't really go anywhere, they encouraged me to talk to HR, but you also have to, even if you have a conversation with them, send a follow-up email to document what you discussed. So those were some of the major things: being very self-aware, still maintaining your professionalism, developing emotional intelligence, being aware, regulating yourself, and documenting.
And since you've implemented those strategies, do you feel like the relationship between you and that particular physician has improved?
So this is the thing. So not initially, it wasn't improved by that. I don't think. I think my response to him, I felt I think the behavior improved because he was finally checked by leadership or HR. Okay. For me, it was like, because I self-regulated, I could see he kept spiraling and I just didn't engage with the behavior. And because I wasn't engaging with the behavior, I didn't have to feel that emotional burden. Okay. But recently, I think in the last 3 months or so, his response to me has been better because, like I said, I've sat down with leadership and HR and said, these are the points, these are the issues. And I think they finally addressed some things. I don't know if they put him on a performance improvement plan. I don't know if they sent him to counseling. There was some conversation indirectly that happened. And I think the fact that I was persistent and didn't back down and did the the charting and the documentation and bringing it up to leadership may have helped. So I think that's why the behavior has drastically improved, because of those things, those steps that I took.
Excellent. And just one other question. Do you feel anxious or um, feel any sort of anxiety, or kind of have like that pit in your stomach going to work, knowing that you still have to deal with someone whose underpinnings are that way? I feel like again, I'm not there, but he probably adjusted his behavior just, to get HR off his back, but not so much because he is actually a decent human. You follow what I'm saying?
Correct. Right. Yeah. So I would say that I did feel that way. I don't feel that way currently, but I don't trust him.
Mm-hmm.
I still document. I try not to engage in any behavior that will trigger him to say anything out of pocket, I guess. But what I was noticing, to be honest with you, and this is why I had to figure out some other alternatives, because when he would say something to me, I would feel like I would disassociate from my patient, in the sense that I could go see my patient, but they would be talking to me and I was like not there, because I was still consumed with the issue that had just happened.
Mhm.
So it wasn't like I could physically go to work and just focus on work and not have to deal with anything else. So that, to me, once I started realizing that that was happening, I said, I have to figure out another alternative, so I'm not so emotionally invested in that situation that I can't focus on my patient.
Mm.
But those are some common happen when you're in toxic environments. You get anxious. You, at least 1 out of 5 people dread going to work.
Mhm.
You get anxious, you get depressed, you get PTSD, especially
Mhm.
when someone's bullying you, got to constantly go back in that environment. And not only that, you take it home with you. And
Yes.
now you take it out on your family, because, and, they're looking at you saying what's going on, but you don't even realize how this is having such a big impact on you.
Okay. Very good. I want to transition a little bit into we've talked about your passion already in terms of just everything that you've discussed thus far. But how did you find yourself on, this is not a question that you received, so this is something that you have to think about for just a minute. But how did you find TikTok as a platform and say, I'm going to use this platform to be the advocacy nurse? How did that manifest?
Okay. I mean, I think I just initially went on TikTok because it was just, not that it was a safe space, but it was a comforting space. I would be able to watch these different videos, snapshots, learn a little bit. And I just, and I can remember like being lost in it for hours, so I'm just like, wow, this is really cool that you can get this message across. And then once I started posting things, I started responding to what people were saying, you know, and then I started hearing more, and then hearing more from people that would leave comments about their situations. And then I was noticing that there seemed to be a theme of lots of videos related to workplace related stuff. And then I would also look at other platforms and I was hearing the same thing on LinkedIn: workplace culture, toxic workplace. And I'm like, I'm already kind of like doing some work around this. So maybe I can start putting some content up that would not maybe directly say what I'm saying, but kind of say it in a way that people know that I get what they're talking about. So I think that was really it. It was just a matter of, I started watching it, gaining some tips on it, saw how other people were utilizing it. And then once I started posting content, saw the response to it, and then decided to do more on that platform. There's a lot of other things that I want to talk about, but the workplace really seems to be impacting people right now.
Okay. What about negativity in terms of, let's just say when you're talking about toxic work environments, racism, because you've talked about a few of those things on your platform. Have you experienced any backlash? Now, I will say this: TikTok thrives on drama. Okay, they push that initiative out there before they'll push something beautiful. Okay, but that's a given. But how do you have you received, what do you think of when it comes to negativity, when it comes to the topics that you are passionate about?
Yeah, so I mean, if it's like a negative comment from someone, I like to, I I feel like I'm a sister that I really want to, okay, let me hear your perspective. If they're willing to give me that perspective, maybe that'll expand my knowledge better. But sometimes it's just a matter of, when they come on and they're like, oh yeah, there's no issue with racism. I'm like, I just shut them down. Like, okay, yeah, I can entertain you by responding, or I could just move on. Because sometimes it's just like people, what you focus on gets bigger. So I could entertain them if I like. Sometimes it's a matter of, okay, well, let me just educate them a little bit more to get my point across. But if they're not getting it, it's just like, okay, next subject. Yeah.
Understood.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So if our viewers want to get in contact with you and know more about your coaching and your services, how can they find you?
So they can definitely find me on TikTok at the Advocacy Nurse. I can give you my email as well. It's drnurse@gmail. Hold on, let me back up. drnurse58@gmail.com. Or they can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm on there a lot as well. But definitely, I would say TikTok, and then my LinkedIn tree is there, so they have more access to some of my information.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us today. This was a very informative conversation, and I personally am a huge fan of your content. I just love your whole presentation and the topics that you discuss. I find it to be fun and entertaining, and I always learn something. So I'm definitely one of your cheerleaders in the comments.
Oh, thank you. I love your content too.
Thank
And
you.
I'm really honored. I'm glad you guys started Nurse Dynamics, and I'm thankful for you having me on as a guest. Just honored to be here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. And this is for YouTube. So please follow us on our social media, other social media platforms, such as TikTok and Instagram at Nursing Dynamics as well. And definitely we're going to put Dr. McIntosh's information in our description area so that you can also find her on TikTok as well, and her other platforms, so that we can really expand on this topic of, I mean, you know, toxicity in the workforce, racism, trafficking and such, and everything like that, so that we can, and then of course, how we have to handle issues as BIPOC nurses in our working environments, whether it be, in my case, in the classroom, or your case in the clinical setting, whatever happens to be, that we have a sounding board of our own to say, okay, you know what, we're tired of it. We're tired of it. And this is our reality. Unfortunately, it is our reality. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching this video as well as others. And until the next time.
Peace.
Bye.